Hi, Leo. Welcome to your October 2019 Astro Update. It's Rena here. So, in compiling your list, Leo, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you, or maybe a lot of you, are going to be dealing with your family in October because the third house for you is Libra, and the sun is in that house for much of the month, along with some other stuff, which I will talk about. And then the fourth house, which for you is Scorpio, is the house of home and family and mother. So you got all that going on. And in the middle of August, there was a full moon in Aquarius, your opposite sign. I'm sorry, what I meant to say in September, the full moon that just happened as I record this the other day was in Pisces. And that for you is the 8th house, which can be the house of death and other people's money. And those two themes put together equal inheritance. So if any of you have had some kind of an inheritance issue recently come into your awareness, you may be kind of like going back and forth with family members in October. And this is coming from that September revelation, or sometimes with full moons, it's bringing things to a head, or maybe even closure. And so things are being, the decision is rendered. Who knows? But in any case, that may or may not make you feel good, depending on what your family is like, Leo. So I say this with a great deal of understanding that not everybody is just having great experiences with their family of origin. And I think it's very important to make that point, because too often in society and in the media, it's assumed that everybody has these wonderful families that they just are very close to. And that is simply not the case. Some people are estranged from their families, or even if they're still in contact, there's a great deal of tension. So as the month begins, the sun is in that third house. The third house, besides being brothers and sisters, is also aunts and uncles and cousins, I believe, so extended family. And it's also your local area. So it can deal with your neighbors, can deal with your hood. It can deal with, local city council if you decide to run for something. What else? It's just the opposite of the 9th house, which is like long distance travels. So it's the exact opposite of that. Very local, around town kind of deal. It's also the house of the mind. It's the house that Gemini rules. It's kind of funny because sometimes I'll get people who say, the third house isn't Libra, it's Gemini. And I understand the confusion because people have learned what each house is ruled by, and then they're not applying it, taking it to the next level that, depending on your chart, it will be different. That leads me to this. Obviously, you guys know that this is a general reading. I don't have to say that, but I do. I still do. I guess I could, do those very advanced types of readings that cover early, middle, and late degree signs. But I still think that sometimes that can be inaccurate. You have to, if you're doing a natal chart, you got to know your time of birth, to really make it accurate. And otherwise, this is just kind of a general thing, but I think it's still handy because I think it can give you some idea of what you're up against. There's still like a couple of people that I watch myself who I really respect. and I get a general feel for what's happening. But in any case, the third house is the house of the mind. So Gemini stuff, communication, media. 11th house that Aquarius rules and third house that Gemini rules, both associated with the internet. And how I would differentiate the two is, I would say that 11th house internet-based stuff is more of building a community, because the 11th house is a community or groups of people, the collective, okay? So if you're somebody who is trying to, get a following on YouTube or whatever, get a following on a blog, the 11th house could be if you have a lot of stuff going on in the 11th, it's that kind of like drive to do that, like Mars in the 11th. In the third house, to me, it's actually disseminating information. And the way that we tend to do that nowadays is through online stuff, computer-based. Even a lot of the media is pretty obsolete in many ways and is copying the internet instead of, having their own content. It's actually quite mind-blowing. I haven't watched television voluntarily for over a decade, and I was somebody who used to watch it all the time. And having derived my information from the internet for the last 10 years, I can see these channels now, and also the print media going to YouTube, setting up their own channels. And the major news networks, having little sound bites, and like everybody else. And they could be, who knows, maybe they have to do that in order to stay relevant. So when, you're going to have some energy in this third house, it's coming over from September. So especially if you work in that field, in the media, or if you're a teacher, this is the house of teaching and learning. Unlike the opposite house, the 9th house, this is not necessarily at the university level. This is more what I would call mundane versus abstract learning. And I say I would call, like I made it up. Obviously, I didn't make that up. I read that somewhere, but that's how I would characterize it for sure. So you may be even engaged in some kind of training course, because Mars is poised to go in here, and actually, well, I'll get to that in a second. So on the 3rd of the month, Mercury goes into Scorpio, the 4th house, and Mercury in Scorpio in general for everybody is kind of like being very selective about what you say, being kind of secretive, conspiracy theories. So if it's related to your family, you may be kind of making that decision that you're not going to spill the beans about something, that you're going to keep your own counsel because you don't know who's doing what to whom. And so you're getting a little bit, I was going to say you're getting a little bit paranoid, but it's not really that. It's just that you are being savvy about, keeping your conversation, to something that deals with what you need to, functional, I would say, rather than kind of like verbose. And this is coming from Mercury in the 3rd house where you would have been. And who knows, maybe you were having a lot of conversations with siblings, and that made you realize, oh, okay, they're flying monkeys. And, if you're dealing with a mother who's a narcissist, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the worst case scenario. Only because if everything is hunky-dory, you don't need me to talk you down or anything. You're good to go. So Anyway, that's on Mercury going into the 4th house on the third. Could mean that you're talking more to your mom, and then you're dealing with some kind of contracts that are connected to real estate. So maybe the family home is up for sale or in a will, something going on with that. On the same day, Pluto goes direct at 20 degrees of Capricorn in the 6th house of health and work. This suggests that some Leos have had some health issues in recent years, perhaps going back as far as January of 2008, when Pluto went into the 6th house. That kind of thing can be very, distressing for people who maybe thought that everything was okay and then they fell apart physically. You may have found in the last however many months, I would say about probably at least 5 months. I can't remember when Pluto went retrograde. It was sometime this year. And you may have discovered something energetically even that is the cause of your health problems. The opposite house to the 6th house is the 12th house. The 12th house is ruled by Neptune, is a house of mental health versus spiritual health or physical health. It's the house of, repressed memories, the subconscious or unconscious mind, past lives. Pluto can connect with karmic experiences. So there may be something going on with that 6th, 12th house axis for you, because the South Node is in this 6th house, as is Saturn. So that these are 3 heavies, and with some Leos, this could be health related, and that might be something that has been a challenge. Not all of you. This is something that you will have already known about. And now that Pluto is direct, I think that you're able to have a kind of a game plan. For those people, hopefully nobody has developed an eating disorder while Pluto has been in this house. One of the things, because I was reading once, I notice how often I talk about, I read this, I read that, but that's how we get information, isn't it? So, I shouldn't feel too self-conscious, but it does feel kind of odd. It's not that I believe everything I read, but when it comes to astrology, it's good to know as many possibilities as possible. And they're talking about in the natal chart, if you have Pluto in the 6th house, that it can indicate an eating disorder, which makes sense because Pluto is obsessive and also controlling, and that's what an eating disorder like anorexia is. I think of it as a form of OCD, and it's looking for that perfection that Virgo, interestingly enough, rules that house, is all about. But with Pluto transiting there could give somebody like this desire to have this very cleansing. I could think of like a raw vegan diet or something where you're really sticking to it obsessively. I know I'm like... The raw food diet is my hobby that I've never actually done. So it's kind of funny. I just read more and more books on it. I've read books for decades on it and never done it. So that's just a little weird quirk of mine. But I could see somebody that has Pluto in this house, and you may have discovered, what? I actually have orthorexia. I'm actually being too controlling over my diet, and there's anxiety attached to this. because when Pluto goes retrograde, it really brings up that shadow for you. And this would be in the area of health. Now, this can also be with coworkers. If you're embroiled in an unpleasant work situation, the 6th house can be coworkers. Maybe in the last decade, there have been a change in your, the people that you work with, and it's not pleasant, it's not pretty. And hey, Leo, let's talk some turkey here. You can be a bit overbearing yourself sometimes when you want to be the queen or king bee. So perhaps you've clashed with somebody. Maybe it's a Scorpio person, and you've butted heads, and your egos are locked in this twisted dance of, who's going to be the alpha male or the alpha female in the office place. Now that Pluto is direct, I think it will take away that psychological probing as much, but you still are going to have to deal with Pluto in this house for another 4 years. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, because you're like, oh man. But of course, again, mileage is going to vary depending on your individual chart. On the 4th, Mars goes into Libra, into that 3rd house. War could be waged between you and siblings, or between you and a neighbor. Was that Robert Frost who had that poem, Fences Make Good Neighbors? Maybe you'll actually build the fence with Mars in the 3rd house. You'll be very active in your immediate environment and just be hammering away, so you don't have to look at their faces anymore. I don't know. Mars in the 3rd house can make you a zealot about getting out the word on something. I don't know what it would be. If you have this book that you really, really want to write, you might just be all full steam ahead and just on it like crazy. On the 8th, Venus goes into Scorpio, that 4th house, and there could be money coming from real estate, money coming from mama, and general peace waged with her. If you had any kind of, negativity. Mars hasn't entered that house yet, though, so, watch out for that. But Venus in the 4th house for some people could be like sprucing up your house. Maybe you paint it. Maybe you redecorate it. Maybe you buy some house bling, whatever that is, like furniture, new furniture, whatever. Maybe you are selling your house or buying a new house. You have the money for it. On the 13th, we have a full moon at 20 degrees of Aries. That's the 9th house. This is the God house. And I personally think that this is more likely to be something of an internalized, like a revelation of sorts, because the 9th house can be long distance travel. So if you are working someplace, maybe on contract, and you're going to come home, or maybe you are in the military and you're going to take leave or come home, you're done with your assignment, somewhere far away, it's come to an end, it's come to its height. But full moons can bring awareness, and this could be with something related to your belief system. Again, going back to the 6th house, sometimes people with health issues eventually find spiritual solace, because sometimes they see doctor after doctor and they can't get anybody to heal them. I mentioned in another video that there's a book that I have. I can't say I've read all of it. I've read some of it. It's called How to Heal When No One Else Can, or something along those lines. And so far, some of the things that this author recommends involve like chanting, doing the oral mantras, and, as a form of healing, as a form of, creating peace within you, meditation, obviously, EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, all these different modalities for healing. But there's a theme to me of the spiritual versus the physical, because sometimes these people have exhausted the physical by, going from one specialist to the next and not getting an answer. And sometimes just out of desperation, they have sought out something spiritual, and that has been of great help to them. So that could be, for some of you, what is going on. It could be that you're having that aha moment about God. Maybe it's a form of a spiritual experience of some sort. But it can also be an ending, on the more mundane level of, I mentioned writing some kind of a book. Maybe you're finishing a book. The ninth house is publishing. The third house is more writing, but the ninth house is publishing. So you could be on that phase of the journey with your book. It can also be graduating from an institution of higher learning. It is kind of a weird time to do so, but you never know, especially with online stuff. And, maybe there's some connection with the third house to a certification program where you're actually getting a certificate. Maybe you already have a degree, but you're going to a university to get, an additional certification, like they do with teachers, an endorsement or something like that. Let's see what else. On the 23rd, the sun goes into Scorpio. So then we have this more intense energy, this water energy. Libra is more light and airy, being an air sign. And Libra forms a friendly angle to you called the sextile. Scorpio, on the other hand, squares you off, and that can create friction, but friction creates growth, and it creates the desire for change. Because when you have the friendly angles, if all you had were friendly angles, you might never be motivated to change, Leo. So you can look at it in a much more philosophical way, and because in Law of Attraction, Esther Hicks talks about, I just had that on the tip of my tongue, contrast. And contrast is when you see what you don't want, or something comes up that you don't want in your reality, and that understanding of what you don't want leads you to more clarity about what you do want. It kind of it's like you have a lump of clay, and it kind of makes your vision clearer because you pare it down more. And it's also a great motivator. What is a better motivator for a person who may be kind of dragging their feet than to have an unwanted experience come to kind of shake them out of their complacency? So the sun goes into the fourth house of home and family, joining Venus. That's nice. Sun is a positive force. So both of these here, it can give you pride as a homeowner. It can give you, if you have bought a house, you may feel like you have arrived, that you have, especially if this is your first house. Or if it's your dream house, you may feel like now it's a part of you, and you really identify with it, with the sun there. Maybe you become Susie Homemaker or the male equivalent. On the 27th in North America, 28th elsewhere, we have the new moon in Scorpio. Again, fourth house, new moon, new beginnings. What's going on that's new there? Do you have a new house? Do you have new understanding with your mom? Maybe you've set boundaries and told her what time it is. so that she understands that you mean business. Especially if you have siblings that are kind of, trying to stir up some stuff. So it might be a new chapter in your relationship with your mom, or this could be a home deal. On the 31st, on Halloween, we have Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, 27 degrees. So 4th house, rethinking something domestically. Having a misunderstanding with your mom. Oh, that'll be fun when Mars goes into the 4th house, and it is on. No, I'm just kidding. All of these things can be interpreted in different ways. With Mercury in the 4th house retrograding, look at contracts. Contracts may have been mucked up and need to be, or maybe you were just putting down money in escrow and now something is not quite what you thought it was going to be. So you might have to redo a contract or renege on one. Who knows? But in any case, that's what I have for you, Leo. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. 19% off all of my readings if you sign up for my newsletter at rainamoonastrology.com. Take care. Bye.